In the years immediately following the Civil War, the railroad was king. And if the railroad was king, its prince was the conductor. Now, Joe Baldwin, he was conductor on the Wilmington to Manchester line. One night, as they were traveling through the swamps and the woodlands there around Maco, Joe had just completed a round of his train and was back in the caboose resting. Suddenly, he became aware of something. The train was slowing down. Joe Baldwin jumped up and ran to the front of the caboose and threw open the door and stepped out on the landing and went to step into the next coach. But there was no next coach. Somehow the train had become uncoupled and his caboose had been left behind, and Joe knew he was in trouble, because right behind his train was a fast freight. He ran to the rear landing and looked out, crying desperately to see the train. Before long, he saw, way off in the distance, just a pinpoint of light. He knew that had to be the following freight, so he started waving his lantern. The light got bigger. He could almost hear the locomotive. The light continued to grow, and then he heard the sound of the whoosh of the air brakes. Then the sound of the locomotive going into reverse and the wheels spinning on the track. He saw the sparks flying off either side of the track as the train tried desperately to stop. That was the last thing Joe Baldwin ever saw. Soon, there was no sound in those swampy woods except for the steam escaping from the locomotive. And there was no light except for the light from Joe Baldwin's lantern that had been thrown way deep in the swamp, and it lay there burning. The next morning, people came to search the wreckage, and they found Joe. Look as they might, and they did look for days, they never did find his head. They found his lantern, where it had laid burning all night, still warm to the touch. A few weeks later, the station master at Maco stepped out onto the platform. It was a dark night, it had been raining, it was foggy, and looked off down the tracks and he saw a little pinpoint of light. Checked his watch and realized it was way too early for the next train. The light kept moving down the tracks. It looked almost as though it were someone carrying a lantern. And then it started to swing back and forth, slowly at first, and then as it got closer and closer to the station, it swung further and swung wilder. And then it seemed to turn and go back down the tracks until it disappeared. Station master didn't know what to make of that, but he didn't think too much about it until it kept happening. Nearly every time there would be a dark and stormy night, that light would come back. Start off way down the tracks as just a tiny point, moving up the tracks and start swinging slowly, and then swing wilder and wilder until it got close to the station, and then it would, as though it would turn and go back down the tracks. Station master wasn't the only one that saw it. Engineers saw it, and they would stop the trains. It became such a problem that finally in the Maco block they instituted a special rule for that railroad that in that particular block, any signals to any train had to be done with 2 lights, and any 1-light signals were to be ignored. People came from all over to see what had come to be called the Maco light. Now, some folks said that it was ball lightning or St. Elmo's fire, but everybody that lived around that part, they knew what it was. They knew it was Joe Baldwin coming back to look for his head. Now, in 1977, the railroad shut down that line, tore up the tracks. When the tracks left, so did the light. It never reappeared. And whether Joe Baldwin found his head or found some other measure of peace, that's the last anyone ever saw of the Maco light.